coldest morning of the year, two little girls in matching red dresses knocked on a stranger's door, with snow clinging to their eyelashes, whispering the words no child should ever say. "Sir, our mom didn't come home." What happened next pulled a quiet janitor, a missing mother, and a 4-star general into a destiny none of them saw coming, and changed the meaning of family forever. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartfelt stories about kindness, courage, and second chances, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more uplifting healing stories to life. The snow had begun before dawn, quiet at first, like a thin sheet of white drifting across the world. By 7 in the morning, it had turned into a full storm, thick flakes swirling under the glow of the old street lamps that lined the retired military housing complex. Most people stayed indoors on mornings like this. Even the seasoned veterans who once fought through jungles and deserts preferred their coffee and warm blankets over the biting cold of a Virginia winter storm. But Aiden Brooks was already awake. He always rose early. Years of military conditioning never left his bones. The quiet hours just before sunrise were the ones he understood best. Steady, predictable, honest. He'd thrown on his faded green jacket, the one with worn elbows, and a small patch sewn on by a child who once thanked him for finding her lost dog. Now, as the storm thickened outside, he pushed his mop bucket down the hallway of the community center, humming softly. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning. Until the knock came. At first he barely heard it, a soft tapping swallowed by the wind. He paused, listening. Then it came again. This time, sharper. Faster. Urgent. Aiden set down the mop and walked toward the outer gate. The cold slapped against his skin when he opened the door, and snow dusted across his boots. Visibility was poor white everywhere. But the hammering sound continued. He stepped closer. Two tiny silhouettes appeared through the blur of snow, standing at the iron gate, shivering. Red dresses, blonde hair tangled by the wind, their small boots half buried in fresh snow. Twin girls, 6 years old, maybe 7. Aiden's heart dropped. He rushed forward, boots crunching through the snow, and knelt before them. "Hey there," he said, gently. Voice low and steady. "Are you two all right?" One girl lifted her face, cheeks flushed from cold, eyes swollen, snowflakes clinging to her eyelashes like crystals. "Sir," she whispered, breath shaking. My mom didn't come home." The world seemed to still. Aiden felt the air leave his chest, not because he understood the full meaning yet, but because he knew fear when he saw it. And this was the kind that came from someplace deep, someplace real. He moved closer, placing warm hands over their freezing fingers. "What are your names, sweetheart?" "Abby," the first girl whispered. "And I'm Aria." The second added her voice so soft he almost didn't hear it. Their matching dresses, the bright crimson fabric, contrasted harshly against the pale emptiness of snow. They shouldn't have been out there alone, not in this weather, not with their hands stiff and their breaths turning to white fog in front of them. Aiden glanced behind them instinctively, looking for a parent, a neighbor, anyone. But there was no one, only the storm. "It's okay," he said, pulling off his gloves and slipping them onto Abby's hands first, then warming Aria's fingers between his palms. "You did the right thing coming here. You're safe now." Just then, footsteps echoed behind him, the sharp, crisp cadence of military boots on icy pavement. Aiden didn't turn. His focus remained on the girls. But he sensed the presence immediately strong, commanding, precise. Whoever it was, their shadow stretched long across the snow beside him. The voice came next. Low, controlled, yet tinged with something he rarely heard from people of rank. Shock. "Good Lord," the woman breathed. When Aiden finally turned, he saw her, A 4-star general. Uniform immaculate even under falling snow. Chest full of ribbons. Dark coat tailored with discipline. Her posture held the unmistakable aura of someone who had spent a lifetime commanding battalions and nations alike. Talia Bennett. He had seen her from a distance before walking through the complex during inspections, surrounded by aides and officers. But he had never seen her like this alone, breath-visible eyes wide, as she stared at the tiny girls clinging to Aiden's sleeves. For a moment, the four of them stood frozen in a tableau carved by the storm. 2 frightened children, a quiet janitor, and a decorated general, who looked as though the earth had tilted beneath her boots. Abby sniffed and held out a small backpack. "We didn't know where else to go," she said, voice trembling. Mommy said, "If something bad ever happened." To find Aiden Brooks. Talia's expression changed instantly. Aiden saw it just for a split second. A flicker of recognition. A ghost rising behind her eyes. Something that didn't belong to the authority of a general, but to the fragile private parts of a person who rarely let anyone see beneath the armor. Her lips parted, as though she had forgotten how to breathe. "Aiden." "Brooks," she repeated slowly, as if the name reached back into a part of her past she'd spent years trying not to remember. Aiden frowned, bewildered. He didn't know these girls. He didn't know their mother. And yet, someone trusted him. Someone wrote his name as a lifeline. He gently squeezed the twins' shoulders. "It's okay," he told them again. "I've got you." Snowflakes landed on Abby's hair like tiny stars. Aria pressed into his arms, seeking warmth, trust, safety. And Aiden felt something shift inside his chest, a quiet pull he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years. A purpose he thought he had buried with his uniform. Behind him, Talia Bennett inhaled sharply, watching the scene, as though witnessing a chapter of fate unfold right in front of her. Something in that moment between the cold air, the 2 trembling girls, and the stunned general made it clear. This was not a coincidence. This was the beginning of something none of them were prepared for, but all of them desperately needed. The wind howled harder as Aiden ushered the twins inside the entry hall of the community building. The warmth hit them like a gentle embrace, melting snowflakes from their hair. Aiden knelt and helped brush off the frost clinging to their red dresses, all while keeping his voice steady and soft, like someone trying to calm a storm inside a child's heart. General Talia Bennett followed, but not with her usual iron stride. No, her movements were stiff, uncertain eyes, flicking from the twins to Aiden, like she couldn't piece together the picture forming before her. Aiden guided the girls onto a bench, then crouched in front of them. "Can you tell me your mom's name?" he asked. "Brooke," Abby whispered. "Brooke Turner Aria," added, wiping her nose with her sleeve. Aiden searched his memory. The name didn't belong to anyone he knew. He wasn't the kind of man who forgot people easily, especially mothers, carrying 2 little girls through a life clearly not easy. "Can I see your backpack?" he asked gently. Abby nodded and handed it over. The little white bag was damp from snow, with a tiny heart stitched in red thread on the front pocket. Something told Aiden the backpack had been loved, repaired passed through small, gentle hands many times. He unzipped it slowly. Inside were the things that told the story of a mother's life in quiet, painful detail. A pair of child-sized mittens, a lunchbox with half a peanut butter sandwich, a folded blanket, a small photo. Brooke with Abby and Aria, all 3 smiling but tired, and a crumpled note shoved deep into the side pocket. Aiden pulled out the note. Last. The paper was worn edges, frayed as though held and reheld many times. The handwriting was rushed, but careful, written by someone who didn't want shaky hands to show fear. He opened it, and the air left his lungs. If something happens, Find Aiden Brooks. No explanation. No context. Just his name. His name. In the handwriting of a woman he had never met. Behind him, Talia stepped closer. The soft scrape of her boots echoed sharply in the quiet hallway. "What's that?" she asked. Aiden hesitated only a moment before passing her the note. The moment her eyes landed on it, her face changed completely. Her lips parted. She blinked once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. The breath she took next was shallow, fragile. Something raw flickered in her eyes. Aiden had seen that look before on soldiers who recognized a ghost from their past. This can't be," Talia whispered. "You know her?" Aiden asked quietly. Talia swallowed hard, eyes locked on the handwriting. "I recognize the way she curves her letters. That looping B, that cross on the T. I've only seen it once in my life." She pressed the note between trembling fingers. "Brooke Turner," she said softly. "That was my sister's name. Before she disappeared 20 years ago." Aiden felt a jolt, sharp and cold, like the winter wind. The twins stared up at Talia, eyes wide, confused, searching for meaning in the adult's expression. Arya tugged on the general's coat gently. "Are you our aunt?" she whispered. The question hit Talia like a blow. Her breath stuttered. She knelt this 4-star general who commanded entire divisions, and her knees actually touched the floor. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she reached out, brushing snow from Abby's cheek with a trembling thumb. The touch was gentle, deliberate, familiar, as if her heart recognized something long before her mind could. Aiden gave her a moment before speaking again. The note, he said, voice calm but firm, shouldn't exist. Talia exhaled shakily. "No, it shouldn't. You think Brooke, your sister, wrote it because she knew something was coming." Talia stood slowly, collecting herself with the discipline of a soldier, pulling fractured pieces back into place. When she finally met his eyes, the steel had returned, tempered sharper than before. "Yes," she said. "And if Brooke put your name on that note, Mr. Brooks, she trusted you with her children more than anyone else." Aiden shook his head. "But I don't know her." "That doesn't matter," Talia said. "She knew of you." There was weight to that sentence, something Aiden felt but didn't yet understand. He folded the note carefully. "The girl said she didn't come home." "Do you have any idea where she could be?" Talia's jaw tightened. "I lost contact with my sister 20 years ago. I thought she didn't want to be found." Aiden studied her, the clipped voice, the tense shoulders, the guilt pressed into every word. "You think something happened to her?" Talia didn't answer immediately. Then she said, the truth stripped bare. "Yes, and I think she knew too." Aiden looked back at the twins, two fragile lives trying to be brave. Fear flickered in Abby's eyes. Arya clutched the photo in her small hands. Aiden knelt again. "Hey," he said softly. "You're safe here with us. Okay. We're going to find your mom. I promise." The girls nodded, trusting him completely, trusting the only adult who had knelt in the snow for them without hesitation. Talia straightened her voice, steady but filled with urgency. "A mother missing in this storm is not something I'm willing to ignore," she said. "And if the woman missing is Brooke Turner, my little sister, then I will use every resource I have." Aiden rose to his full height. "Then we start now." The general's eyes narrowed, studying him, really studying him. "You speak like someone who's led searches before." Aiden simply replied, "I speak like someone who won't let 2 children lose their mother." Talia held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well," she said. "We find her. Together." And just like that, a silent pact formed between a quiet janitor, who had once been something far more, and a 4-star general who had just discovered the most fragile piece of her past still lived. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside that hallway, a new storm, one of truth fate and long-buried connections, had only just begun to rise. The storm had thickened outside, coating the windows in a frosted blur, but the warmth inside the community hall did little to settle the heaviness that lingered in the air. Abby and Aria clutched one another on the bench, their small shoulders trembling, as if fear itself seeped into their bones. Aiden sat beside them, offering the calm presence only a man who had weathered darker storms could give. Talia Bennett stood near the doorway, her sharp silhouette framed by the swirling snow. But she no longer looked like the unshakable 4-star general the military world knew her to be. The discovery of her sister's name, the memory of a handwriting she had not seen in decades, it rattled her. Beneath the medals and rigid posture was a woman suddenly confronted with a past she thought was buried permanently. Aiden leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Girls, can you tell me when you last saw your mother?" Abby swallowed hard. "Last night." Aria nodded, holding her sister's hand. "She tucked us into bed. She kissed our foreheads, like always." "What time did she leave for work?" Aiden asked. 11, Abby whispered. "She works the night shift, always comes home before we wake up." Aiden exchanged a glance with Talia. A mother working late hours wasn't uncommon, but disappearing without a word, that was something else entirely. "Do you know where she works?" Aiden asked gently. Abby lifted the small photo from her backpack, pointing at a badge clipped to Brooke's shirt. Aiden leaned closer. "Riverton Industrial Processing Plant," he read aloud. Talia frowned, recognizing the name. "That facility's been under scrutiny for overworking employees, long hours, restricted areas." Aria's eyes watered. "Mommy said she didn't like it there, said the bosses were mean." Abby nodded. "She said they make her work extra hours without letting her call us. They take everyone's phones." Aiden inhaled slowly, piecing the clues together. Forced overtime. No phones. No contact. A missing mother. A note naming him in advance. Nothing about it sat right. "Did she ever tell you she was scared?" he asked. The twins looked at each other. Then Abby whispered. "She said, some nights she felt like someone was watching her." Aiden felt a chill deeper than winter. Talia stepped forward, folding her arms tightly as if holding herself together. "Mr. Brooks, we need to move. Every hour counts." Then her gaze lowered to Abby and Aria, softening in a way that surprised even her. "But they can't go out into that storm again." Aiden looked down at the girls who were leaning into him, with the trust of children who had already decided he was their anchor. "I'll take them to my place," he said. "It's just across the courtyard. Safe, warm. Then we head out." Talia raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting you and I conduct this search alone?" "I'm suggesting," Aiden replied calmly, "that Brooke Turner didn't leave that note by accident. If she trusted me with her children, she trusted me with finding her." Talia held his gaze for several moments, reading something in his expression. Discipline, urgency, perhaps an echo of the soldier he once was. Then she nodded. "Very well." Aiden wrapped the twins in his coat and guided them through the snow to his small apartment. He switched on the heater, prepared warm cocoa, and tucked them into the couch, with blankets that smelled faintly of pine soap. "Are you coming back?" Aria asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Aiden said, kneeling so he was eye level with her. "I'm going to bring your mom home." Abby reached out and took his hand. "Promise," his voice softened. "Cross my heart." He stood only when the two girls finally closed their eyes, exhaustion pulling them into sleep. Outside, Talia waited beside her government-issued vehicle. Snowflakes landed on her coat, melting instantly against the fabric. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes betrayed something vulnerable. Fear, regret, hope, a rare mixture for a woman of her rank. "You're good with kids," she said quietly when Aiden approached. "I've had to be," he replied simply. She didn't press further, but a part of her clearly wanted to. Instead, she unlocked the car and they climbed in. The drive toward the industrial district was silent at first, except for the soft hum of the engine and the muffled howl of wind. Then Talia spoke. Brooke disappeared when she was 16. She began eyes fixed on the road. One day she was home, the next, she packed a bag and vanished. Our parents died shortly after. I enlisted, and I searched. Everywhere. Every city. Every record. Aiden didn't interrupt. Talia's grip tightened on the wheel. I found nothing. It was like she erased herself. Until now, Aiden murmured. Talia let out a shaky breath, not weakness, but the release of decades of unanswered questions. She left a note. "With your name." While Aiden stared ahead at the snow-choked highway. I don't know. But even as he said it, something churned inside him, a memory, faint but insistent. A voice he couldn't quite place, a moment he couldn't fully grasp. Something connected him to Brooke Turner. He could feel it beneath his ribs. But the truth remained buried under years of silence he never meant to unravel. The plant finally appeared in the distance, a looming structure of metal and smoke, surrounded by an empty parking lot drowned in snow. No sign of movement, no lights in the workers' wing. Aiden stepped out of the car, surveying the building, with the cold, calculating gaze of someone trained to assess danger. "Look at that," he said quietly. What Talia asked. The footprints. Aiden crouched near a patch of snow, some deep, some dragging. Someone was exhausted or injured. Talia joined him, her breath freezing in the air. "You can read that from the snow." "You'd be surprised what the snow remembers," Aiden said. Then his voice dropped lower. "These tracks lead toward the back, not the main entrance." The general's jaw set. Someone didn't want her noticed. Aiden nodded. "That's what I'm afraid of." The storm howled louder, as if urging them forward deeper into the truth. He rose to his full height, shoulders squared, senses alert. He wasn't a janitor in that moment. He was the man he used to be. A man who searched. A man who protected. A man who never let innocent people vanish into the cold. "Let's find her," Aiden said. And beside him, Talia Bennett, 4-star general sister, and a woman caught between past and present, stepped into the storm without hesitation. The back of the Riverton Industrial Processing Plant looked nothing like an entrance meant for employees. The snow piled high against the rusted metal siding, and the single security light flickered weakly, barely pushing back the darkness. Aiden moved ahead with practiced precision eyes scanning the ground, then the building, then the shadows that lurked between the loading docks. Talia Bennett followed a few steps behind her breath, visible in sharp bursts. She was a woman accustomed to commanding hundreds, yet here she was, entrusting one quiet janitor with leading the way. Except he didn't move like any janitor she'd ever seen. He crouched beside the dragging footprints, again fingertips brushing lightly over the disturbed snow. "This way," Aiden murmured. "How can you tell?" Talia asked, lowering her voice instinctively. Aiden pointed. "These prints. Look." He traced the marks with a gloved finger. "Right foot is deeper. Left foot's dragging. Whoever walked here was leaning heavily on something, or someone." Talia narrowed her eyes. "Injured?" "Yes," Aiden replied, and struggling. The wind whipped around them, pulling at their coats, but neither moved until Aiden stood and scanned the fence line. There. He nodded toward the base of an industrial vent. Something caught. Talia stepped closer and felt her stomach tighten. A piece of fabric, red and soft like children's gloves, was snagged on a jagged metal edge. Aiden took it, gently rubbing the cloth between his fingers. Brooke carried one of the twins' gloves in her jacket pocket, he said, for comfort when she worked the night shift. Talia blinked, caught off guard. How do you know that Aiden didn't lift his eyes from the glove? Kids told me. A mother usually keeps something small to remind her why she's enduring the hard stuff. Talia's chest tightened, not from the cold. You speak like a man who's seen mothers fight battles alone, she said. Aiden didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he slipped the glove into his pocket like it was something that needed protecting. This happened last night, he said. Brooke was conscious when she came through here. She dropped this. Or someone tore it from her coat. Talia stared at the dark outline of the warehouse, her voice dropping low. Then she was trying to leave this place. Aiden nodded once, and she didn't make it home. They circled to a side door, nearly covered by snowdrifts. Aiden pressed his shoulder against it. It didn't budge. Frozen shut. He shifted his weight, pushing harder, but still nothing. Let me, Talia said. No, Aiden countered immediately. Talia arched an eyebrow. Excuse me. Aiden stepped in front of her. If the hinges snap or the ice breaks wrong, shards could fly. I'll take the hit. Talia stared at him, taken aback. Not by the defiance, but by the reflex. Protective, natural, automatic. A soldier's instinct buried beneath civilian clothes. Move back, Aiden said gently. She obeyed, not because he outranked her, but because something in his posture told her he had done this many times before. Aiden dug his boots into the snow, braced his shoulder, and slammed against the door twice. On the third strike, the frozen seal cracked with a sharp snap, and the metal groaned open. A wave of cold, stale air drifted out. The inside of the warehouse was dim, silent, abandoned-looking. But Aiden felt the wrongness immediately. The faint smell of machinery still warmed the lingering echo of movement in the air, like someone had been here not long ago. Talia swept her flashlight across the room, revealing metal racks, conveyor belts, stacks of cardboard boxes. Shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. Aiden spoke quietly. This plant supposedly shuts down at 8 p.m., but the machines are warm. You're saying someone stayed late, Talia said, or forced someone to. Talia's jaw tightened. They moved deeper into the warehouse. Aiden's eyes caught the smallest details. The slight scuff on a box edged the faint smear of something on the floor, the shape of footprints, half covered by falling dust. He knelt again beside one of the prints. Small shoe size, he murmured. Brooke. Talia crouched beside him, heart pounding. The air smelled of metal dust and something else. Something sour. Fear. Aiden stood and walked toward a break room door with a sliver of light underneath. He pressed a finger to his lips, silent communication, and Talia nodded. He opened the door slowly. The room inside smelled of coffee left on a burner too long. The lights buzzed overhead, and on the far bench, half buried under an emergency blanket, was a woman. Pale, exhausted, unconscious. Brooke Turner. Aiden crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her. Her breathing was shallow. Lips, dry hands trembling. She's alive, he said, relief softening his voice. But she's dehydrated and exhausted. Talia froze in the doorway, her throat closed. It was her sister, the little girl she once protected, the teenager she lost, the memory she carried like a wound that never healed. Brooke, Talia whispered, doors cracking for the first time in decades. Aiden looked up sharply, understanding dawning between them without a word. She stepped forward slowly, as if afraid Brooke's image would dissolve if she moved too quickly. She reached out trembling fingers, but stopped inches from Brooke's cheek, unable to touch. Aiden placed a steadying hand on Talia's shoulder. Let her feel your warmth. Talia closed her eyes for half a moment, gathering courage she didn't need on battlefields, but desperately needed here. Then she touched her sister's face and broke. Silent tears fell, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, aching years of guilt melting into the cold air. Aiden lifted Brooke carefully into his arms, as though she were made of glass. She weighed almost nothing too light for a woman who worked double shifts to feed her daughters. As he stood, Brooke stirred, faintly whispering something. Aiden leaned closer. Please. Abby. Aria. Don't leave. His throat tightened. I've got them, he whispered. They're safe. Talia stepped back, brushing tears, quickly returning to the controlled breathing of a soldier, but her eyes stayed soft. Let's get her home, she said. No, Aiden replied. Not home. Hospital first. Talia nodded. I'll clear the route. Aiden carried Brooke through the cold snow falling around them like white silence. Talia walked beside him, matching his pace. For the first time, the formidable general wasn't leading the way. She was walking beside the man her sister trusted with her life. The drive to the hospital cut through the storm, like a slow-moving lifeboat against an unforgiving sea. The sirens on Talia's government vehicle stayed silent. The general didn't want attention, but the flashing hazard lights carved a trembling path through the white chaos. Aiden sat in the back seat, cradling Brooke as though she were something fragile the world had mishandled one time too many. Her head rested against his chest, her breathing shallow, faint tremors running through her body each time the car jostled over a bump. She was feverish, dehydrated, and frighteningly light. Talia's knuckles were white around the steering wheel. She never took her eyes off the road, but every few seconds, she flicked a glance into the rearview mirror at Brooke, at the man holding her, and at the invisible 20 years she had lost. The storm thinned as they neared the hospital, though the wind still clawed at the windows. The emergency entrance glowed warm against the cold night, like a beacon offering a chance at something resembling safety. Aiden carried Brooke through the sliding doors. Nurses rushed forward, and Talia flashed her identification, not the badge of rank, but the one that said urgent, in ways no one could deny. Within minutes, Brooke was on a hospital bed. 4 lines, placed warm blankets wrapped around her. Machines beeped a steady rhythm, a rhythm Aiden listened to like it was the only thing holding him upright. He stood at Brooke's bedside long after the nurses left his large hand, resting gently over her frail one. Talia stood near the window, looking out at the falling snow, her profile sharp against the dim hospital lights. The doctor returned after a short examination. She's severely exhausted, he said, adjusting his glasses. Likely from prolonged overwork and dehydration. But she's stable. We'll keep her on fluids for the night. She's lucky she was found when she was. Talia stiffened. Lucky, she repeated under her breath, like the word itself carried 20 years of sorrow. The doctor excused himself. Silence settled over the room, and then Brooke stirred. Aiden. Her voice was a thread, but it was there. Aiden leaned close. I'm here. You're safe. Her eyelids fluttered. Recognition flickered. Then steadied. A soft breath escaped her lips, as though she had been holding it for hours. You came, she whispered. Aiden frowned, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Brooke, have we met before? Brooke didn't answer with words. Instead, her gaze trembled toward the foot of the bed, toward the door, where Talia stood frozen in place. Their eyes met. Time folded. A long, shaking breath left Brooke's chest. Talia. Talia's hand shot up to her mouth. The chair behind her scraped the floor as she stepped forward, like gravity itself was pulling her toward the bed. Brooke. Her voice broke completely. Brooke's lips trembled. Her eyes filled. Tears slid sideways onto the pillow. "I looked for you," she whispered. "And I never stopped," Talia replied, sinking to her knees beside the bed. She took Brooke's hand in both of hers, holding it as if anchoring herself to reality. "I thought you didn't want to be found. I thought I failed you." A sob tore from Brooke's throat, raw, aching, desperate. "I was scared. I was too young. I didn't want to ruin your life." "You could never ruin my life," Talia said, forehead leaning against Brooke's hand. "You were my whole family." Aiden stepped back quietly, not intruding, not interrupting, just letting the moment unfold. He had seen soldiers reunite after war. He had seen families healed after loss. But this moment was something softer, something carved by wounds that never had names. When their tears finally quieted, Brooke turned her gaze to Aiden. "The girls," she whispered urgently. Abby Aria Odin moved close again, his voice warm, steady. "They're safe, sleeping on my couch." Brooke let out a breath so heavy it deflated her entire chest. The relief on her face was indescribable. "You took care of them," she said. "I just did what anyone would." "No," Brooke whispered, shaking her head weakly. "Not anyone." Her fingers reached for his hand, gripping lightly, grateful, desperate, trusting. It hit Aiden hard right in the place he'd tried to keep closed for years. Then Brooke's breathing hitched. "Aiden." "They knew I wanted to leave." Her voice quivered. "At the plant. They kept us longer. Locked the doors. Said we couldn't go home unless we finished quota. When I protested, they said if I left, I'd lose my job." Talia's eyes narrowed to cold steel. Illegal labor practices. Forced overtime. Brooke nodded, tears forming again. "I tried to sneak out early, and when I finally got to the back exit, I collapsed. I think someone left me there, instead of helping." Aiden's jaw clenched, hard. "You're telling me they left you unconscious, in a freezing break room?" Talia asked, fury simmering beneath her words. Brooke's voice was small. "They said we were replaceable." Aiden's breathing deepened, the slow, controlled inhale he'd perfected years ago, when the world became too dark, too harsh, too unforgiving. "Brooke," he said softly, "you're not replaceable, not to your daughters, and not to your sister." Brooke's eyes glistened with gratitude and something else, something directed entirely at Aiden. "I wrote your name," she whispered, "because I overheard 2 workers talking. They said if anything ever went wrong in this neighborhood, find that janitor Brooks. He always helps. I didn't know you, but something told me you were the only safe place for my girls." Aiden blinked. That was all it took, some stranger's casual comment, a whisper carried through hallways, and Brooke trusted him with the most precious parts of her life. He swallowed, voice tightening. "Your girls are precious. They deserve safety. You deserve rest." Talia touched Brooke's shoulder. "You're coming home with me once the doctors clear you. You won't work another unsafe shift again. I'll make sure of it." Brooke nodded weakly, eyes softening. "I want them safe. That's all I ever wanted." Aiden stepped closer, speaking gently. "They are. They will be." Brooke's gaze drifted to him, steady, warm, full of a mother's deepest gratitude. "And you, Aiden," she whispered, voice barely above a breath, "you already saved them once." He didn't reply. He couldn't. Not when something in his chest began to thaw slowly, quietly, the way winter always begins to surrender to spring. Morning crept into the hospital room with a soft glow, the kind that gently nudged the world awake rather than demanding its attention. Snow still fell outside, gentler now, drifting lazily past the window like feathers shaken loose from a winter sky. Brooke slept peacefully at last, the steady rise and fall of her chest a comfort none of them took for granted. Aiden had stayed the entire night, not because anyone asked him to, but because leaving didn't feel like an option. He sat in the visitor's chair, long legs folded awkwardly, arms crossed loosely over his chest. The exhaustion etched on his face did nothing to diminish the quiet alertness in his eyes. He drifted off only for minutes at a time, waking at the slightest sound. A soldier's rest. A protector's rest. Across the room, Talia Bennett stood by the window, watching the morning sky brighten. Her uniform jacket was folded neatly over the back of a chair, leaving her in the plain navy underlayer of her military blouse. Without her medals, stars, or cap, she looked less like the formidable four-star general who shaped national strategies, and more like a woman struggling to process the greatest miracle of her adulthood. Her sister was alive. The weight of it sat in her chest so heavily she'd had trouble breathing throughout the night. "You didn't sleep," Aiden murmured. Talia didn't turn. "Neither did you." "I'm used to it," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "So am I." Her eyes softened, but for different reasons. Aiden stood stretching quietly and crossed to Brooke's bedside. He checked the IV line instinctively, an old habit from missions where medics weren't always nearby. Talia watched him, observed him, studied him with a gaze sharpened by decades of reading men in high-stakes situations. "How long were you in service?" she asked. Aiden paused. His shoulders tensed for a moment, barely noticeable, but not to someone trained to see everything. "A lifetime ago," he said simply, "but not forgotten," Talia replied. Aiden didn't answer. Before the silence could thicken, the door burst open. Mommy, two small figures sprinted inside red dresses, swishing boots tapping against the linoleum floor. Abby and Araya rushed to the bed, their little voices trembling between joy and fear. Brooke's eyes fluttered open at the sound, weak but instantly responsive to her children's cries. "Girls," Brooke whispered, lifting trembling arms. The twins climbed onto the bed, with the care of children who understood fragility. They wrapped themselves around her, burying their faces against her neck, their tiny shoulders shaking with pent-up fear. "Mommy, we were so scared," Arya cried. "You didn't come home," Abby added through sobs. Brooke held them as tightly as her weakening body allowed. Tears streaked down her cheeks, falling into their hair. "I'm here," she whispered again and again. "I'm here, my loves. I'm so sorry." The room swelled with warmth, a mother reunited with her children, a moment stitched together by faith and desperate hope. Talia watched from a few feet away. At first, she kept her distance, arms crossed, chin trembling almost imperceptibly, like someone observing a scene she wasn't sure she belonged in. Then Arya spotted her. The little girl blinked, sniffed, and whispered, "Mommy, who is she?" Brooke turned her head slowly toward Talia. Emotion washed over her features again. Shock, disbelief, nostalgia, grief, love. "That's..." Brooke paused, swallowing hard. "That's your auntie." Both twins looked up at Talia, eyes round, shining curious. Auntie Abby whispered. Talia finally moved one hand, lifting to her chest, as if steadying the heart beneath. She approached slowly, almost cautiously, as though the floor might give way under her. When she reached the bedside, Brooke reached out her hand. "Come here," Brooke urged softly. Talia took Brooke's hand with both of hers, kneeling just like the night before. Abby and Araya watched the two women, sensing something sacred they didn't have words for. Talia breathed shakily. "I lost you," she whispered. "I lost you for 20 years. Brooke cupped her sister's cheek. "I never stopped loving you." Aiden stepped away, giving them space. Something tight pulled inside his chest, something he'd felt only a handful of times in his life. The moment your actions helped restore something broken, something precious. It was the closest thing to grace he'd ever known. The room stayed wrapped in quiet emotion until Abby tugged on Aiden's sleeve. "Mr. Aiden, did you find Mommy in the snow?" He knelt to match her height. "I found where she needed help." "And you helped her?" Arya asked. "I did my best," Aiden said softly. The girls hugged him without hesitation, arms flung around his neck, faces pressed against his shirt. The spontaneous affection caught him off guard. He froze for a second, then wrapped his arms gently around them. Brooke watched their tiny bodies pressed against the broad-shouldered man who had chosen to protect them without being asked. There was gratitude in her eyes, but something deeper too, something she wasn't ready to name. Later, when the girls dozed off on Brooke's bed, curled like little kittens beside her, Aiden stepped into the hallway with Talia. "We need to talk," she said. Aiden leaned against the wall. "About Brooke. About you," Talia corrected. He raised a brow. Talia crossed her arms. "Brooke trusted your name. She had no reason to know you. And yet, when she believed she might never make it home, she wrote your name." Her voice sharpened. "People don't carve their last hope around a stranger." Aiden didn't blink. "So what are you implying?" "I'm not implying," Talia said. "I'm asking, who are you really?" Aiden looked down the hallway, watching nurses move between rooms. "I'm someone who's made mistakes," he said. "Someone who doesn't want to lose people anymore." Talia studied him carefully. "You talk like a man who had a unit taken from him." Silence stretched. Aiden's jaw tightened. "War takes things. And leaves other things," Talia added gently. "If you ever choose to tell me what it left you, I'm here." He didn't respond, but for the first time he didn't turn away either. Before leaving, Talia placed a hand on his arm. "Aiden," she said quietly. "My sister and my nieces. They're safe today because of you." He shook his head. "They survived because they're strong." "Yes," Talia agreed. "But even strong people sometimes need someone to save them." Her eyes held his with a gravity that demanded acknowledgement. "You've earned my trust," she whispered. "And that is rare." Aiden swallowed, unsure how to accept praise he'd never sought. But he did nod, a small nod, the kind that marked a silent pact between two protectors, one decorated with stars, the other cloaked in humility. Inside the room, the twins slept beside their mother. Outside the room, two adults stood guard. A family long fractured had begun quietly, tenderly to piece itself back together. And Aiden Brooks, the man who had spent years alone in quiet corners, was now part of that healing, whether he liked it or not. Winter softened over the next few days, though the snow still clung stubbornly to rooftops and pine branches. The storm had broken, but its echoes lingered on the icy sidewalks, on the pale morning light, and in the slow, careful steps of the people whose lives it had shaken. Brooke remained in the hospital for observation, regaining strength hour by hour. Abby and Arya visited daily, bringing handmade drawings of hearts and stick figures that resembled their mother, their aunt, and a very tall man with long hair and a gentle smile. Their laughter filled the sterile room with warmth. And through it all, Aiden Brooks became a quiet constant. He never announced his arrival. He never made himself the center of anything. But he showed up every morning before his shift and every evening after. Sometimes with warm oatmeal, sometimes with fresh fruit cups for the girls. Once with a blanket he'd kept from his service. Days a thick, heavy thing that smelled faintly of cedar and memories. Brooke had smiled when he placed it over her legs. "It's too nice," she murmured. "It's meant to keep someone warm," he replied simply. "Might as well do its job." She looked at him a long moment, eyes softening in silent gratitude. He looked away first. By the fourth morning, Brooke was strong enough to sit up in bed, her hair braided loosely over one shoulder. The twins curled on either side of her, flipping through a picture book. Aiden slipped in quietly, a paper bag in hand. "You're all awake early." Brooke smiled. Hospital beds aren't exactly comfortable. Abby lifted her head eagerly. "Mr. Aiden?" "Look, we drew you in this one." Aiden leaned in, and sure enough, on the last page, a stick figure version of him held hands with two little girls, his long hair drawn dramatically like a superhero cape. He chuckled, warm and genuine. "That's quite the hairstyle." "You look like a prince," Aria declared, matter-of-factly. Brooke laughed, a soft, melodic sound that surprised even her. Aiden straightened, suddenly aware of how close they all were. He held up the bag. "I brought breakfast. Oatmeal cinnamon rolls and pancakes." "I heard someone likes pancakes." Both twins shot upright. Me too." Aiden unpacked the food, setting it neatly on the bedside table. He moved with easy efficiencies, as though he'd done this 100 times before, and maybe he had in a different lifetime for different people. Brooke watched him with quiet fascination. "You're very good with them," she said softly. Aiden shrugged. "Kids understand kindness. You give it, they give it back." Talia entered at that moment, holding a clipboard and a steaming mug of tea. Her gaze softened when she saw the scene. Aiden helping the twins cut their pancakes, Brooke leaning back with a tired but peaceful smile. "You make this place look like a family kitchen," Talia remarked. Aiden offered a humble half-smile. "Just breakfast." "No," Talia said knowingly. "Much more than that." Brooke's eyes met her sister's, both women understanding something unspoken. Later that afternoon, a hospital volunteer wheeled Brooke outside into the courtyard for some fresh air. Abby and Aria trailed behind, bundled in matching coats. Aiden walked beside them, hands in his pockets, scanning the icy paths automatically. Still in soldier mode, Talia teased from behind, joining them. "Old habits," Aiden replied. The courtyard was quiet, dusted with white. The twins immediately began building small snow animals, while Talia stood nearby, giving Brooke and Aiden space. Brooke's voice was gentle. "Aiden, can I ask something?" He looked at her. "Of course. Why do you care this much?" Her fingers toyed with the blanket on her lap. "You barely know us. But you've been here. Every day." Aiden took a slow breath, watching the twins pack snow into clumsy shapes. "When I was younger," he said quietly, "I lost people because I didn't act fast enough, or because I wasn't there. And that stays with you. It changes how you move through the world." Brooke listened, heart tightening. So now Aiden continued, "If someone needs help, if I can ease their burden even a little, I try to do it." No hesitation. Brooke's eyes glistened. "That's a very lonely kind of kindness." Aiden's jaw tightened ever so slightly. "Sometimes." She hesitated, then reached out, touching the back of his hand. Her voice trembled. "You weren't late this time." Aiden swallowed the words, sinking deeper than anything he'd allowed himself to feel in years. "We're okay because of you," Brooke whispered. He didn't respond, but his eyes softened in a way Brooke had not seen before. Over the following days, the healing continued, not just for Brooke's body, but for the tender threads connecting everyone. Aiden tied Abby's shoelaces when they came undone. He taught Araya how to fold little paper boats. He draped his coat over Brooke when she napped in the chair. He carried the girls to the lobby when they fell asleep from long visits. He helped Talia fill out the necessary paperwork to move Brooke to safer employment. But most of all, he listened. Brooke told him about working double shifts to afford food, about the nights she cried quietly so the girls wouldn't hear, about the fear of being alone, about the guilt of running from her past, specifically from Talia. Aiden never judged. He never asked for more than she was ready to share. He simply offered presence, steady, warm, unwavering, And that kind of healing, the quiet kind, was something Brooke hadn't known she needed. One evening, as snow fell in gentle flakes outside the window, Brooke watched Aiden carry a sleeping Abby to her hospital bed with an ease that made her heart ache. Talia whispered beside her, "He cares for you all, deeply." Brooke's breath hitched. "I know. And when a man like that cares," Talia said softly, "he doesn't do it halfway." Brooke looked at Aiden, at the kindness carved into every line of him, at the patience in his movements, at the gentleness he didn't even realize he showed. Hope warmed her chest, dangerous and new. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of it. The first sign that something was wrong came with a silence too sharp for a pediatric wing. Aiden Brooks had just finished his afternoon shift and walked back into the hospital boots, damp with melting snow. He carried a small paper bag, Abby and Araya's favorite banana muffins. The girls had insisted Mr. Aiden's muffins tasted better than anything the cafeteria sold, and though Aiden always denied having any special recipe, the routine had become a small joy in their days. But today, the hallway felt off. No giggling, no pattering footsteps, no twin voices calling his name. Aiden's instincts sharpened instantly, every sense rising in alert. He approached Brooke's room. The door was open. Inside, Brooke sat upright in bed, papers scattered across her lap. She wasn't crying, but her face was pale, her breathing heavy. Aiden stepped in. "Where are the girls?" Brooke looked up sharply, fear flooding her eyes before she could hide it. "Talia took them downstairs for a short walk," she said. "But they came back with only one." Aiden froze. "Which one?" Aria Brooke whispered. The paper bag slipped from Aiden's hand. Brooke's voice cracked. "Aiden, Abby's missing." Downstairs, chaos was brewing. Doctors, nurses, and Talia Bennett herself were forming search teams down the hall. The general's voice, normally controlled, commanding, was frayed at the edges. I stepped away for less than 60 seconds. She barked into her radio. 60 seconds. She was holding my hand. Then she wasn't. "Every exit is to be sealed immediately." Her aide responded quickly. "Ma'am, security is sweeping the north and east wings now." Aiden arrived just as Talia ended her call. "What happened?" he demanded. Talia turned toward him, eyes blazing, jaw locked in fury, fear, and something far more personal. "She let go of my hand," Talia said, voice raw. "A nurse called my name. I turned. 1 second, and then she was gone." Aiden nodded once. No judgment, no blame, just action. "Where was she last seen?" "Near the vending machines in the lower corridor." Aiden didn't hesitate. He started running. The hospital's lower level was dim, with old vending machines humming against the walls, and supply carts parked crookedly from the last shift change. Aiden scanned the floor footprints, wheel patterns, scuff marks. He dropped to one knee. Aria's tiny boot prints were easy to identify. "Abby," he muttered, "where did you go?" He followed them around the corner toward the storage wing. Halfway down the hall, he saw something that stopped him cold. A small pink hair tie. Abby's. He picked it up, closing his fist around the little object, as if holding on to hope itself. Then he heard it. A faint cry. A child's. Muffled. Aiden's pulse surged. He sprinted. Behind a stack of supply crates near the loading dock, a small figure hunched, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them. Abby Aiden shouted. Her tiny head snapped up. "Mr. Aiden," she scrambled toward him, stumbling through the half-melted snow that had drifted inside through the drafty loading door. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground and holding her tight. She sobbed against his shoulder. "I couldn't find Mommy. I couldn't find Aria. I thought you left too." "You're okay," Aiden murmured, pressing a steady hand to the back of her head. "I've got you. You're safe." Her small fingers clutched his shirt with desperate force. "I got scared. I heard shouting. I thought bad people came back." Aiden closed his eyes, pain squeezing behind his ribs. "No bad people here," he whispered. "Just people who love you." When Aiden carried Abby back upstairs, the hospital lobby fell silent. Brooke gasped from her wheelchair, Talia standing tensely behind her. The twins' mother covered her mouth with trembling hands. "Abby," she cried. Abby reached for her mother instantly, and Aiden lowered her into Brooke's embrace. The three clung together, Brooke shaking, Abby sobbing, and Aria pressing against them as if anchoring the family back into place. Aiden stepped back, giving them space. Talia approached him, her posture stiff, her eyes filled with something that wasn't just relief. It was gratitude mixed with shame. "I lost her," Talia said quietly. "You found her," Aiden corrected. "You called for help. That matters." "No," Talia whispered. "You found her." Again. Aiden shrugged lightly. Someone needed to. Talia stared at him, a long, searching look that peeled back layers she'd never allowed anyone to touch. "You don't know what it means," she said slowly, "to trust a man with your family. Not when you've spent your whole life guarding every vulnerable part of it. But you've earned more trust in a week than most people earn in years." Aiden didn't know how to answer that, so he didn't try. He simply nodded. Later, after the paperwork and chaos settled, Abby sat on Aiden's lap, while Brooke rested exhausted, but calmer. Talia stood nearby, arms folded, not in disapproval, but in reflection. "Abby," Aiden said softly, "why did you wander off?" Abby sniffed. "I heard someone crying." Aiden and Talia exchanged a glance. Who, Talia asked. "I don't know," Abby said. "It sounded like a grown-up. Like Mommy, but not Mommy." Brooke stiffened. "Another woman." Abby nodded. The room fell quiet. Talia exhaled slowly. "The hospital has dozens of patients. Could have been anyone." "Could have been," Aiden echoed. But the doubt lingered in his eyes. Brooke reached toward Aiden, her hand trembling with fatigue. "You saved her again," she whispered. Aiden shook his head. "She found me. I just followed her fear." Brooke's eyes glistened. Fear doesn't lead children to just anyone. He had no answer for that either. As evening settled, Talia pulled Aiden aside after Brooke and the twins fell asleep together in the same hospital bed, a messy, tangled pile of love and relief. "You're something else," she said quietly. "The way you moved, the way you searched, the way you read the floor like it was a map." Aiden didn't look at her. Old skills. Old, Talia said, but not rusty. He didn't respond. The general stepped forward, voice dropping. "Brooke isn't just my sister. She's everything I have left from my childhood. And Abby and Aria. They're blood. They're my chance to fix every failure I made by losing Brooke the first time." Aiden finally turned. "And you, Aiden," Talia said, eyes steady, "are becoming part of that chance." He stilled. Talia held his gaze, serious, unwavering, respectful. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing her back. Twice." Aiden swallowed thickly, and for the first time in years, someone's gratitude didn't feel like a burden. It felt like belonging. The snow had calmed into a soft drizzle by the time Aiden stepped out of the hospital later that night. The wind felt gentler now, brushing past his cheeks, like a reminder that storms, no matter how fierce, eventually pass. Still, his chest carried the weight of the day. Abby's disappearance, Brooke's trembling fear, the look on Talia's face when she realized how easily the world could take someone she loved again. Aiden closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cold steady him. It had been a long time since he'd felt this invested in anyone's life. Too long. He turned when he heard the sound of boots crunching behind him. Talia Bennett approached with her hands tucked into the pockets of her heavy coat. The moonlight caught the silver in her hair, the single streak she'd earned during years of high command loss and responsibility that few could ever understand. "Aiden," she said quietly. He nodded. "General." "We're past that now," she murmured. "Call me Talia." He studied her for a second. The woman before him was not the imposing figure who commanded fleets. She was someone stripped down to her human core, grateful shaken, and deeply aware of how fragile life could be. "All right," he said softly. "Talia." She exhaled, then motioned for them to walk. They moved side by side along the quiet path leading toward the dim lights of the parking lot. For a while neither spoke, until she stopped and faced him fully. "Aiden, what you did today wasn't normal." "I just acted fast," he replied. "No," she shook her head slowly. "I've seen men act fast. I've trained them, led them, lost them. Speed alone doesn't explain how you tracked Abby through a hospital with no map, no cameras, no time to strategize." Aiden looked away, jaw tightening. Talia narrowed her eyes. "You moved like someone who's done this 100 times. Someone who's been in the field. Someone who knows how fear moves a child. And how danger hides between seconds." Aiden didn't respond. Talia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You saved Abby today the same way you saved me in 2015. His shoulders stiffened. "I didn't know you remembered," he said quietly. A slow, fragile smile appeared on her lips. "You didn't think I'd forget the man who carried me out of a collapsed training facility." While everyone else panicked, Aiden's gaze softened with something like humility. Or regret. "That was a long time ago," he murmured. "Not for me," she said. "Some moments stay forever." The cold air settled between them as she continued. "You weren't just another rescue officer. You were the one they sent when everyone else said the situation was hopeless. You found 5 soldiers alive under 15 feet of rubble. And then you came back for me." Aiden took a slow breath, memories flashing dust darkness, the sound of tearing metal, the cries of injured recruits. He'd kept those memories buried, locked behind years of self-imposed quiet. "You don't owe me anything for that," he said. Talia's expression softened deeply. "Maybe not. But I remember how you kept going, long after your team said it was impossible. You saved my life. You saved my command." Her voice caught something rare for a woman who'd faced nuclear briefings without blinking. "Now you've saved my family." Aiden looked at her, really looked. Beneath the rank, the power, the years of command. She was a sister terrified of losing Brooke again. An aunt trying to make up for decades of distance. A woman clinging to the fragile threads that had finally reconnected. "This isn't about owing me," he said gently. "It's about doing what's right." Talia shook her head. "No, Aiden. This is destiny." He blinked. Destiny. She stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the glow of the distant hospital lights. "I've spent my life believing everything has earned rank, respect, success. But family feels like something given, and the fact that you've saved my family twice, in 2 completely different points of my life. That's not coincidence." Aiden looked away, unsure how to carry the sudden weight in his chest. "That night in 2015, Talia continued after you pulled me out. They told me you refused recognition, refused medals, refused the spotlight." She paused, why Aiden's voice was low. "Recognition never brought back the people I couldn't save." Talia inhaled sharply, piecing together something he didn't say. "You lost someone," she whispered. Aiden's jaw tightened again. He said nothing. "You don't have to tell me," she added gently. "But I want you to know this: no one carries the weight of the world alone. Not even legends." He looked up sharply at the word. Talia smiled faintly. "Yes. Legend? Most of your missions are still classified, but I've seen the reports. The men you saved, the villages, the flood rescues. The operations no one even knows you ran." She paused. "You weren't just good, Aiden. You were extraordinary." Aiden exhaled shakily, the cold mist swirling around his breath. "I'm not that man anymore," he murmured. Talia stepped so close that her voice was almost a whisper. "Maybe not. But what I saw today," she lifted her chin, her words deliberate, "was the same man who refused to quit when the world needed him." Aiden swallowed, caught between past and present. "You don't get to run from that kind of calling," Talia said softly. "Not when it keeps leading you back to the same family." "My family." He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the truth of her words sink deep. When he opened them, Talia rested a hand on his arm. "Whatever destiny is," she whispered, "I think it's crossing our paths for a reason." Aiden didn't step away, didn't retreat. He simply nodded, a quiet nod, accepting the truth he couldn't ignore anymore. Talia stepped back, breath trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said this time, as a woman, not a general, "for saving me in the past, and for saving them now." Aiden held her gaze. "You're welcome." The wind rustled around them, carrying the faint echo of children's laughter, still clinging to the hospital walls. And in that moment, Aiden Brooks, quiet, hero, worn-down janitor soldier who once tried to disappear, felt something unfamiliar. Possibility. For the first time in years. The day Brooke was discharged from the hospital felt like the first real sunrise after a long winter. The storm had finally broken, revealing a world blanketed in clean white snow, soft light reflecting off rooftops and sidewalks. Aiden arrived early with the twins, bundled in warm coats, hand-knitted scarves, and mismatched mittens they insisted on choosing themselves. Brooke stepped out in a wheelchair, escorted by a nurse. Her skin still looked pale, but her eyes held color again. Warmth, relief, life. When she saw the girls, she reached for them instinctively, and they ran into her arms, giggling, burying their faces in her coat. Aiden watched with a quiet smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He didn't try to insert himself. He simply observed, steady, silent, present, as he had been since the storm began. Talia walked out moments later, coat buttoned tight against the cold. But her posture had softened. Losing Abby for those terrifying minutes had left its mark on her heart. She wasn't taking chances anymore. "Let's get everyone home," Talia said. "My car's warm." Brooke shook her head gently. "I want to go to Aiden's first." Talia blinked in surprise. Aiden froze. The twins cheered. "Pancakes," they shouted. Brooke flushed slightly, brushing her hair behind her ear. "The girls feel safe there, and I want to thank Aiden properly." Aiden opened his mouth to protest, but Brooke's gaze softened him instantly. "Please," she added. He nodded once. "All right." Aiden's home wasn't large, but it was warm. Wooden shelves lined the living room. Books and small, hand-carved figures filled the spaces between. A fireplace glowed softly. A kettle simmered on the stove like it had been waiting for them all along. The twins ran in first, their boots thumping loudly, followed by Talia, who took in the scene with the trained eyes of someone who had never quite believed Aiden Brooks lived in a place so gentle. Brooke stepped through last one slow breath at a time. She looked around the room, her expression touched by something fragile, like gratitude, deep enough it needed careful handling. "This place," she whispered. "It feels safe." Aiden swallowed. Hard. Safety had once been his life's mission. Then it became the thing he failed to give. Now, here in this moment, it was returning to him. "Sit," Aiden said softly. "You need rest." She nodded and settled into the cushioned chair near the fire. The warmth flushed her cheeks. The girls climbed onto the rug at her feet, leaning against her legs like sleepy kittens. Aiden moved to the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves with quiet ease. Talia followed. "You're cooking?" she asked. Aiden smirked faintly. "Unless you want the girls to cook." Talia raised her hands in surrender. "Proceed." Aiden whisked pancake batter with practiced motions. Talia watched him, studying the way he moved, not like a janitor, not like a soldier, but like a man who had finally stopped running. "You care more than you want people to know," she said. Aiden didn't look up. "Doesn't matter what I want." "It does," Talia replied. "People like you spend your whole lives protecting others. But you rarely let anyone protect you." He paused, just a fraction of a second, then resumed whisking. "I don't need protecting." Talia smiled softly. "That's what I used to say, too." Aiden exhaled through his nose. "You trust me with your sister and nieces. That's enough." Talia nodded. "It's more than enough." When Aiden served the food, the room filled with the buttery scent of pancakes and the sweet crackle of syrup. The twins devoured them with ferocity. "Daddy Aiden makes the best pancakes," Abby declared with her mouth full. The room fell silent. Brooke's eyes widened. Talia choked on her tea. Aiden froze mid-step, spatula in hand. "Daddy Aiden," he repeated. Abby blinked innocently. "Well, if you lived with us, we'd get pancakes every morning." Artia nodded, and Mommy would smile more. Brooke's cheeks flushed so red Aiden swore the heat from the fireplace doubled. "Aye, girls," Brooke stammered, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He's just helping." The twins exchanged looks, the kind that meant they're adults. They don't understand anything. Aiden sat, slowly placing the spatula on his plate, as if it were a relic from another world entirely. "Sorry," Abby whispered. "We didn't mean to make it weird." Aiden offered a gentle smile. "It's not weird." Brooke looked up sharply, surprise flickering across her face. He held her gaze a second longer than necessary. The moment hung between them, warm, fragile, charged, with something neither had the courage to name. Later, after Talia drove Brooke and the girls back to her home for the night, Aiden stayed behind to clean up. But halfway through stacking plates, he found himself staring at the empty chairs around the table. He could still hear Abby's voice. "Daddy Aiden." He exhaled deeply, pressing his palms against the counter. He had not expected this. Not the storm, not the girls, not Brooke, not the way his home felt different when she was in it. He had built a quiet life, intentionally quiet. Safe. Simple. Uncomplicated. And now he felt an ache he hadn't allowed in years. A knock broke his thoughts. When he opened the door, Talia stood there, snowflakes clinging to her coat. "Aiden," she said. "I need a minute." He stepped aside. Talia entered, looking around the home that now smelled like maple syrup and laughter. She faced him squarely. "What happened tonight? With the girls? With Brooke?" She paused. "It's more than gratitude." Aiden didn't speak. Talia continued, voice firm but warm. "You care for them, deeply, and they care for you. A beat. And my sister hasn't smiled like that since she was 16. Aiden swallowed. "Talia." "No," she said softly. "Don't deny it. Not to me. Not to yourself." He didn't argue. Couldn't. Talia stepped closer. "If they choose you," she whispered, "I won't stand in the way. You've earned your place in their lives." Aiden looked at her with something like disbelief. "And if Brooke chooses you," Talia added gently, "I will trust her judgment." Aiden's voice was barely a rasp. "And what do you think?" Talia smiled, a small, rare, deeply human smile. "I think destiny doesn't cross paths without reason." Aiden stood there, rooted in place, the truth settling through him like the slow warmth of dawn. Then Talia touched his arm. "Go to them tomorrow," she said. "Not because they need you." Her eyes softened. but because you need them too. That night, Aiden sat alone by the quiet fire, the house still carrying echoes of the day. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Not really. Not anymore. Snow drifted lazily outside the window of Aiden Brooks' small home, the flakes catching what little morning sunlight crept through the overcast sky. It was the kind of winter day that felt suspended between seasons, quiet, reflective, waiting for something to shift. Aiden stood by the kitchen counter staring at 2 mugs of hot cocoa he'd just made. One had little marshmallows floating on top. The twins always insisted on extra marshmallows. The other mug was simpler, just cocoa and a hint of cinnamon. Brooke liked it that way. He didn't know why he'd made them. Habit, maybe. Hope, maybe. Or something softer and far more dangerous. Something he could no longer deny lived beneath his ribs. His quiet morning was interrupted by a knock. Not frantic, not hurried. A calm, deliberate knock. Aiden opened the door and froze. Talia Bennett stood on his porch, bundled in her military coat, snow settling on her shoulders. Behind her stood Brooke, wrapped in a soft gray coat, cheeks flushed from the cold, her hair braided in that gentle, slightly messy way that somehow made her more beautiful. And between them, holding each other's hands, were Abby and Aria. The twins spotted him and lit up instantly. "Mr. Aiden." We came to visit. Aiden stepped aside, heart thudding in a slow, powerful rhythm. Brooke walked in, last eyes lifting to meet his. There was something there, something she'd been holding in for days, something she was ready to finally let out. Aiden's breath hitched. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Brooke nodded, though her fingers trembled slightly. "We needed to see you," she said softly. "All of us." Aiden glanced at Talia, who gave a slight nod, an approving one, the kind generals gave when signing off on missions that mattered more than paperwork. "Come in," Aiden said, stepping back fully. The twins rushed to the living room and immediately spotted the untouched mugs on the counter. "Mommy, look, Mr. Aiden made cocoa with marshmallows." Brooke blushed. "You didn't have to, I know," Aiden said. "I wanted to." Her eyes softened like thawing snow. Aiden sat with them around the fireplace. As Brooke settled on the couch, the twins curled under each of her arms. Talia stood near the window, watching quietly, her expression warm with understanding. Abby leaned close. "Mr. Aiden, we had a talk last night." Aiden raised a brow. "A talk?" Aria nodded vigorously. "A very important meeting." Brooke covered her face with her free hand. "Girls, maybe we should—" "No, Mommy," Abby insisted. "He needs to know." Aiden swallowed a laugh. Nobody asked. Abby took a deep breath, the kind a 6-year-old takes before saying something monumental. "We want you to be part of our family." The room fell silent. Brooke's cheeks flushed so red she looked like she might burst into flames. Talia's brows rose, but her lips curved into a smile she didn't bother hiding. Aiden blinked. "You want what?" Aria scooted closer. "Mommy said families can grow. And Auntie Talia said destiny brings the right people together," Abby added. "And we said, why can't Aiden stay forever?" Heat climbed up Aiden's neck. He looked at Brooke, who was frozen in a mixture of mortification and something far deeper. "Girls," Brooke whispered, voice trembling. "This isn't how adults talk about this kind of thing." "But we're not adults," Aria said proudly. "We're kids. We say the truth." Brooke buried her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Aiden." He shook his head slowly, gently. "No," he said. "Don't apologize." Brooke lowered her hands, eyes shimmering. Aiden looked at the twins, then at Brooke, then at Talia, who watched quietly, her posture relaxed, as though she already knew where this moment was heading. And he exhaled the breath of a man who'd been holding too much inside. "Maybe," he said quietly, "we should let your mom speak too." Brooke's heart pounded audibly in her ears. She lifted her chin and met his gaze. "I want to try," she said softly. Aiden froze. Brooke continued, voice trembling but firm. "I want to try being a family again. A real family. With my girls. With my sister back in my life. And," her hands wrung together, "and with you." Silence deepened, not uncomfortable, but full. Full of everything they hadn't said, everything they'd been afraid to feel. Aiden stepped closer. "Brooke," he said softly, "you've been through enough. You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude. I'm not talking about debt," Brooke interrupted gently. "I'm talking about choice." Her eyes welled. "For years I've been surviving, fighting, running, alone." Her voice cracked. "And then you walked into my life and showed me what safe feels like again." Aiden's eyes softened, like a candle melting inside him. "And the girls," Brooke whispered, looking at the twins who were listening with wide eyes. "They adore you, in a way I can't. I can't deny or dismiss." Aiden knelt so he was level with all three of them, Brooke and her daughters. "And what about you?" he asked gently. "Do you want me here?" Brooke's breath caught. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." For a long, precious moment, everything was still. The fire crackled softly. Snow tapped lightly at the windows. Talia watched with a small, almost motherly smile. And Abby and Araya pressed their tiny hands into Aiden's shoulders, anchoring him to a place he'd never expected to belong. Aiden exhaled a long, trembling breath that released years of loneliness, guilt, and wandering. Then he pulled the twins close first, hugging them both tightly. They squealed with joy. Brooke's hand hesitated, then reached for his shoulder. He turned to her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. He leaned in slowly, gently, and pressed his forehead against hers. Not a kiss, not yet, but something deeper. A promise. A beginning. A home. Talia sniffed quietly, pretending it was from the cold. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "someone better start the pancakes." Abby gasped. "Yes," Arya cheered. "Daddy Aiden pancakes." Aiden laughed, deep, warm, unguarded. He looked at Brooke. She smiled. Aiden wrapped his arms around his new family, Brooke, Abby, Arya, and held them close. Outside, snow continued falling, but inside that home, winter finally thawed. They had found what they'd been missing all along. Not just safety, not just rescue, not just fate. A family, a future, and a second chance at life born from kindness, healed by love, and carried forward together. Before we close today's story, we'd love to hear from you. Where Are You Watching From? Our community is filled with wonderful people from all over the United States and around the world, and your comments truly bring this channel to life. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of the quiet strength found in family kindness and second chances, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful, uplifting stories for you. And finally, thank you for spending your time with us today. We truly appreciate you, and we hope this story brought a little warmth and light into your day. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.